Hey boys and girls, hi! I'm wearing what some people call my Jedi robe. I made this robe myself about 20 years ago. It's made out of twill hemp. It's 100% natural hemp. Completely indestructible. Why am I wearing it? Because it's really cozy when it's extra cold outside. It actually is. It's incredibly comfortable to have a lot of deep thoughts in. It's just snuggly. I know snuggly is not technically a word, though, right? But we make up words like snuggly because they're cute. I'm going to edit that out of this video. This is actually an important video on fields, and it's an incredibly important point that actually greatly illuminates what Nikola Tesla said, that you can think deeply and yet be insane, but you have to actually be able to think deeply and clearly. And he made reference to those people today that are deep thinkers, but they can't think clearly. They have a lot of insane thoughts. They have PhDs. The same issue was a problem in Tesla's time, and it's way worse now. And I'm not interested in going after those people. I'm really not. I'm just trying to point out a really important point. Everybody will bring up the Michelson-Morley experiment as if that disproved the ether, which of course absolutely in no way, shape, or form did. There's only ever been two things postulated, and I can say this as the person that literally wrote the book on magnetism. Only two things have ever been postulated about what exists outside of the magnet. I know this is not a magnet, but let's assume that it is. Almost nobody says this, by the way. There have been a couple, so I have to point it out. So there's only ever been two. Yeah. Space-time. I've gone over this endlessly. There's no such thing as space having properties. Nikola Tesla railed against that endlessly because space doesn't have properties. It has attributes. But I can't think other than a couple of crackpots, nobody in academia, not that I support anybody in academia. There's a couple good people in academia, but only a couple that have ever said that, there's warp space-time outside of a magnet. This comprises the magnetic field. The other one is something that's even infinitely more radical, foolish, and insane, and that is, and if you don't believe me, ask me for the link. There are hundreds of links like this. Last one I saw was University of Chicago, physics department. It's globally, yeah? Well, let's say it's happening. Say, what is this? Because people ask simple questions, and a lot of times these boards will have places where you can ask questions of physics. And of course, I love reading the answers because they're so radically foolish. And they'll say, and these have never been seen, they've never been proven, they're completely a radical idea, like talking about unicorns and leprechauns. They literally say, virtual photons are being emitted by the magnet, and that comprises the magnetic field. You see, I've said this many times, and nobody really understands it, maybe a few of you do, that when you eliminate out the ether, and of course the ether cannot be eliminated, you must replace it with something. For communication, yeah, that communication is gravity, and that really confuses them, because we have instantaneous action at a distance regarding certain field phenomena. And by the way, no branch of physics or science has ever defined a field. They can't tell you what a field is, actually engage in circular fallacies of reasoning. You ask them what a field, they'll say it's lines of force. Well, there's no such thing as lines. Actually, the idea of lines came up from seeing the constructive and destructive interference seen in the dual slit experiment, and you can also see the lines underneath the ferrocell. Lines of what? Lines are not things of nature. These are descriptors referring to what human beings see. So accurate description, incorrect explanation. They don't say lines of force. We've already dismissed lines. Force, of course, is not a thing either. Neither are waves. There's no such thing as waves. Waves are not what something are, rather what something does. Force is not a thing either. Force of what, by what, and upon what. Force is not a thing. Here's force. Oh, it's not. There's no such thing as force. Force of what, by what, and upon what. And I say, well, we've dismissed lines of force, completely ridiculous. They'll actually just run in a circle like a dog chasing its tail. But once again, getting back to it, only two things have been postulated. Space-time, which I've only heard a couple crackpots say that. The other thing is virtual photons. Never been the input-output of any experiment ever done. There's absolutely zero evidence for them, and by their own admission, they use this crazy idea to replace the ether, because the ether can't be replaced. But in denying the ether, you have to replace it with something else for communication. A magnet, of course, is not emitting anything. The question is, what is a magnet? And people don't ask, you have to be able to think deeply and clearly. You must not only be intelligent, but wise. 99.9% of people in academia, and this is a really important point you need to learn, are highly intelligent, but they're fools. This means they can think deeply, but they can't think clearly at all. They can remember math equations. I have a PhD in physics. Well, good for you, but nothing you say is logical or sensible. It's just foolish. Nature cannot work that way. It's impossible. Anyway, we have to get to the root of something and then work our way back. And this is where retroduction is so important. Yeah, it really, really is. Because before a magnet becomes a magnet, and this is 100% undeniable by anybody on this earth, including the academics, before a magnet becomes a magnet, it's 100% quantitatively identical as to when after it then becomes a magnet. First it's a slug, case of neodymium iron boron, super powerful magnet, or samarium cobalt, makes no difference. Then it's turned into a magnet, but it's quantitatively identical. A magnet, of course, is a qualitative point source object. This is something physicists don't really understand, and people in academia don't understand, and people in general definitely don't understand, point source objects. So the only thing that actually defines a magnet, it is a qualitative thing. A laser is a generator of light. You notice I didn't say emits light. No different than a light bulb. Well, 5 watts is 5 watts, and that is quantitatively identical, but there is a huge qualitative difference between a 5-watt laser and a 5-watt light bulb. I'll get to that in a second. So this idea that, a magnet is emitting anything is completely ridiculous. A point source object doesn't have an additive field, rather a multiplicative one. In the case of geomagnetic precession or the Lamore frequency, in the case of a magnet. You ever sat in a bathtub when you were younger? Some of us still do that today. You like stir your finger in the water and you create this little vortex. You stir your finger vigorously. I don't know, I did that as a child. You create this little vortex in the water. It's really cool to look at. You pull the plug on the drain and after a few seconds this vortex starts to form. Everybody's fascinated by vortexes. So geomagnetic precession, of course, getting onto that. So a magnet, of course, is a point source object. It is not additive. It is multiplicative. I'd like to get to that in giving a laser example here in just a second. A 5-watt laser is not additive. It is not 5 units of light. In the case of watts, it is multiplicative. I don't know if you've ever held a 5-watt laser, which are technically illegal here in the United States. You're not allowed to sell them. But they're really, really powerful, incredibly dangerous, especially to human eyesights. But it's not additive like a 5-watt light bulb, which is 5 watts of, incoherent light. It's a multiplicative effect in the case of a laser. 5-watt light bulb, I don't know if you've ever seen one, is basically like a super close-up reading light for where everyone's dark in a bedroom or whatever. You don't want to disturb somebody with a bright light, and you got it really, really, really close, just so you could read a book by. 5-watt laser is, you need to wear goggles. It's incredibly dangerous. It's just bright as hell. It's just so wickedly dangerous. You could really, really permanently damage your eyes instantly with a 5-watt laser. They're really, really powerful. It's not additive, it is multiplicative, and the same is in the case of the magnetic field of a magnet. Not additive, but multiplicative. So you don't have 5 units of something. For example, case of a laser, you have a multiplicative of those units. So instead of 5, 1 plus 1 plus 1, it's a lot more powerful. It is many magnitudes more powerful. So anyway, a magnetic field of a magnet, its entire mass in geomagnetic precession, also too called the Lamore frequency, is actually churning up the ether outside of the magnet. Charles Proteus Steinmetz was talking about AC generators And they were, quote-unquote, doing a lot of churning up of the ether down in the power station of Niagara Falls. This is what of course, an AC generator, as I've said before, doesn't actually generate power, it manifests it. It is not making something out of the water that turns to the turbine. It is not generating, not transforming one thing into another. It is manifesting that power. It is not generating it, which is a nuance with a difference, a distinction with a huge difference. So a magnet is basically just a field laser. It's a multiplicative object. A laser is a point source object. People say, laser is coherent radiation. Well, that's descriptively accurate, but what a laser actually is, and I got a video coming up on this, and there are many countless examples of validity on this, not just my idea. A laser is a point source object. Same thing a magnet actually is, a point source object, or you can say, like I said, a magnet is a field laser. A black hole, of course, is also, too, a point source field object. However, it's vanished from the visible universe, and its mass is it's a supermass with no magnitude. And it's a counterspatial object generating ultra-high energy light, i.e. hydrogen. These are called galactic jets or astrophysical jets. The point I'm getting to on this is the fact that, just think about this for a second. And this is 100% undeniable. Like I said, other than a couple crackpots saying that magnets are bending space and time, which nobody in academia, not that I support academia at all, ever says magnets are bending space-time. Completely ludicrous. They all say that a magnet is emitting virtual photons, which is a completely, not my idea, a hardcore fact, a made-up concept with no validity whatsoever. None, not the input or output of any experiment. They use it to make the equations balance out. When you eliminate out the ether, you have to replace it with something super radical, super foolish, super nonsensical. What do you think is the communication medium? Oh, there's that medium again. There's that word medium. That's just another euphemism for the ether. We can't use the word medium. We have two magnets, and what's going on between them? You know, what's the medium? But we can't say medium. That's just another word for the ether. Well, we know it's not warp space-time. You know, we know it's not virtual photons because Mother Nature is not crazy and insane. She's a hippie chick with hairy pits, muddy feet, and a hemp skirt. I'm wearing a hemp robe right now, so that's kind of fitting, right? And dreadlocks. Don't forget her dreadlocks. So what do you think the communication, because when you eliminate out the ether, what really happens is that you have to introduce these magic particles that are sending communications. Let's just say that I'm completely lobotomized and unintelligent, an academician, in other words. I've eliminated out the ether, which can't be done. But in my mind, I've eliminated it out. What we have now are these invisible little things called virtual photons. Like little, you remember people that used to knock on your door, and they sell you garbage you didn't need or wanted you to join some weird group, you know, and they got a little propaganda to hand to you. That what's going on between two magnets, according to the absurdity and foolishness that these people propose, is that, you know, these little door-to-door salesmen, they're invisible. They've never been seen experimentally. They're completely ridiculous nonsense like unicorns and leprechauns. They're traveling between these magnets at the speed of light, like instantaneous action at a distance, which if you introduce particles and you have instantaneous action at a distance, you end up breaking their so-called speed of light. Nothing goes faster than speed of light, but they know for a fact that instantaneous action at a distance, or IAAD, is real. You have these invisible little door-to-door salesmen, you know, just trillions and trillions and trillions of them, go traveling back and forth between the magnets and knocking on each other's doors saying, hey, there's another magnet nearby. You need to either accelerate towards it or you need to be repelled by it. It's just the level of absurdity. When you replace the ether, which is impossible, but in their minds they do. Oh, yeah, the ether doesn't exist. We have to replace it with something. Because everybody, even a child, if you tell a child, you know, just enough to communicate with, you know, that virtual photons are traveling between these magnets while they're accelerating, you know, or they're being repelled. It's like, that's just ridiculous. I don't see anything. Well, you can't see them. Oh, like some sort of advanced scientific experimental equipment? This is the child. Some sort of advanced, super expensive, super califragilistic scientific equipment has witnessed it somehow, or no, it should never been the input or output of any experiment. They're completely theoretical nonsense that we came up with that explains what's going on, since we don't believe in the ether. Oh, God. The ether makes everything super, super simple, just like Mother Nature herself. Muddy feet, dreadlock, hemp skirt, simple chick. You can't explain nature with virtual photons. These things don't exist. I'm not making it up when you say virtual photons. Well, that sounds ludicrous. You have to be just making that up to be making fun of academia. No, I'm not. That's what these people tell people. You could go on to all these physics boards in Chicago, New York, Berkeley, Princeton, Harvard. These people say the same thing everywhere. They literally do. They actually believe that nonsense. I mean, I kid you not. Stop the insanity. That's the saying this weight loss chick used to say. What was it, Susan Powder? Stop the insanity. She had a nose ring. She lost like 600 pounds and she had snow white hair. Stop the insanity. The ether is undeniable. 100%. No magnet is emitting anything. You create levels of absurdity and insanity that are so off the Richter scale when you're saying that these invisible, unseen, and of course there's plenty of things that are real yet unseen by human eyes. These things are not seen by anything, scientific equipment, nothing. It's a completely made-up idea. In an attempt to replace the ether, which is impossible, you have to replace it with something else that would explain what's going on. And the only thing that they have, obviously so, is particles. Everything is fields, and fields are not particles. That, however, is not a denial of atoms. But all atoms are compounded hydrogen. And what is hydrogen? Hydrogen is ultra-high energy light. Let me point it to you in another fashion that nobody ever talks about. Nobody on YouTube, nobody on any, and this is a hardcore, undeniable fact. A laser, a magnet, a black hole, all have one thing in common that make them so fascinating. Everybody on this earth, whether they be stupid or smart, wise or foolish, is fascinated by the principles and attributes of lasers, magnets, and black holes because they behave in a fascinating fashion. There's this field outside this object. It's like unseen magic. One thing these all have in common is that they're all point source field objects. Because a magnet is not a quantitative object. Well, here's a magnet. It's made of made of neodymium iron boron or samarium cobalt or ferrite magnet. Yeah, this is the object. But before it becomes a magnet, it is 100% quantitatively identical. The only thing that defines a magnet is its qualitative nature. Everything operating in unison, it is now a point source object where all atoms making up the compound construct, whether it be samarium cobalt or ferrite or neodymium iron boron, are operating as one. It's the same distinction of the Roman fascia. I don't know what you know what the Roman fascia is. A bunch of sticks that are bound together with twine, even though they're simple little fiddly sticks that any kid could break, but when you got a bunch of them and you bind them together, they operate as this powerful, powerful union. That's the idea of Roman soldiers. They'd operate as one entity, and they're basically undefeatable. That's the only thing that's going on in a point source object. It's a very, very crude analogy, of course. You know, you could take 100 sticks and that are hovering over a bucket hole, and if you just pounce on it, you're going to break through very easily. But if you take those 100 sticks and you bind them up, you know, you could take elephants, you make a bridge out of them and walk elephants across them. Multiplicative field objects and multiplicative objects where everything is operating in unison become incredibly powerful. And also, too, that power extends beyond the object itself. In the case of wow, there's this field around the magnet. But academicians, in their insanity and foolish, well, they're emitting virtual photons. That's what's going on. He's like, if this is a piece of steel, which it's not, it's silver, you know, there's these virtual photons, these little invisible creatures that are going out at the speed of light, and they're knocking on the door of this piece of steel. And it's telling the steel to accelerate, you know, steel objects accelerate. That is just like the pinnacle of foolish absurdity, illogical nonsense, laughable twaddle. I mean, that's just ridiculousness. I scoff at the people that scoff at me for talking about the ether. Well, I not only scoff at their absurdity of virtual photons, which there's less than zero proof. What is less than zero proof? Not only is there no proof, but less than zero proof is something so radically insane and absurd and ridiculous and completely contrary to Occam's razor or common sense of even a child. Even a child, that's crazy! What do you mean virtual photons? I don't see anything. It's like, well, a little kid's halfway smart. And the little kid goes, well, I know there's a lot of stuff I can't see. So what machine is it that can see these virtual photons? It has to be some sort of scientific testing equipment. Like, no, it doesn't exist. We've never seen them. You know, they don't exist. We just made them up. Like, well, who's the smart one here? The kid or I have a PhD in particle physics. These are the people, and I kid you not, with no exaggeration, on hundreds of boards of the most prestigious colleges on earth, Princeton, Harvard, blah, 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 blah. They have message boards where sometimes these physicists and the doctoral candidates will answer questions. And people say, what's going on around a magnet? You know, what is that thing around a magnet? Virtual photons. The ether is an undeniable absolute. It can't be denied by anybody. It is impossible. Now, people believe all sorts of stuff, and I don't care what people believe in. I care in facts, logic, and wisdom. I hope you liked this video. I hope it kind of cleared a thing or two up. I hope. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.